Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits Special Edition video. Well, I promised the other day that I was going to do a set of videos, in this case on my review of the brand new released Zak Bagans documentary known as The Demon House. This was something that I was looking forward to for the longest time ever. It was finally released just this past week. In fact, it's been around, at least in development, if you call it, for about 3 years or so. And I've documented it on my other videos. You've seen those as well. And so to finally have a chance to see it in all of its glory, it's a great experience to do so. I shared that just the other day that I ended up purchasing it and I saw it, and then here's my review of it as well. I'm going to actually split this review into two parts. One is going to be the good part of the movie, and then the other one is going to be the bad parts of the movie. That way I get to share easily the two distinctions between them. And it has been a movie that has split audiences, those that have reviewed it. It kind of worried me at the beginning when I was seeing the news on it, the reviews from the people that saw it, because some of them are stating that it's really, really great. Others are stating that it never lived up to its promise or its hype that it had for these good number of years. Luckily, though, I fall under the camp now where it's actually a pretty good film. It's a good documentary if you go at it from a certain angle, and I'll explain that here in a minute. But yes, indeed, let's go ahead and let's talk about all the info, in this case, the good stuff associated with this movie. By the way, if you do have a chance, I do recommend at least renting it or buying it if you wanted to. Amazon, that's where I got it. They have it for like $9.99 to buy it. And so that's where I purchased it. But I'm sure they have other options elsewhere like Vudu or iTunes or others when it comes to purchasing or renting it. If you're a fan of Ghost Adventures, this is for you. If you're a fan of paranormal stuff altogether, this one is for you as well. It's definitely something where it has a good number of parts, which I'm going to explain here in just a minute. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the good stuff first associated with this documentary. For starters, yes, this was something that was in development for quite some time. I mean, I was reading the history of it for these good number of years, and even after watching it, I decided to reread some of the history to catch up on some stuff that I missed. So this was a house that was in Gary, Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, that was supposedly or arguably and still allegedly, depending on who you're talking to, haunted. And the reason I say all this like allegedly, supposedly, is because even within the film itself, they talk to several people that state nothing really happened to them when they were there. But at least with regards to the family in question, yes, there's definitely some stuff that happened to them. He purchased this house sight unseen, as the film documents note several times. In fact, I read up on it. He purchased it for $35,000. Good price, essentially, I guess, for that area, a cheap price. And then that way he was able to use it for this documentary. The family that he purchased it from, they stated that, of course, that it's haunted. They experienced multiple serious occasions there of the paranormal. The mom herself experienced some stuff as the film showcased, and then also the children in particular were picked on the most, with some of the children arguing, yelling at each other, apparently in tongues. Some of them also experiencing bad things in the basement, which was the main epicenter, if you could call it, of the hauntings, and then also showcasing this to others who happened to be visiting, because the family apparently had protective service, child protective services members that would come and visit, and they would see the stuff that would happen. The family members had relatives that would also come, and then they would experience some of this stuff too, including seeing, like, shadows, hearing voices, seeing things thrown, stuff involving, cold spots, the usual stuff when it comes to the paranormal world. And what makes this so distinct is that even going outside of the home, whatever these things are, and supposedly there's 200 demons within the house, not just one, not two, but 200. They seem to follow the family everywhere, including those same relatives. The relatives, they would go back to their homes and they would start experiencing things. And then also, whenever they went to like hospitals, other staff members there would see the children and the effects of these hauntings, including some possessions, according to the documentary. There's even some notable scenes that showcase, I guess you could call it like the big climax of these possessions, where one of the kids actually started walking on a wall up towards the ceiling, all in front of the hospital staff, all at the same time, while growling and yelling, just acting animalistic, completely just out of the ordinary, and then everyone relating it to the paranormal. I mention all of this because the film does a really good job of laying the groundwork of the history of the home. It's just like your average Ghost Adventures episode, except more detailed. In fact, as I was watching this, it hit me that why this movie was good, or because it was getting better as I was watching it, and this was because it reminded me of the very first documentary, the ones that the Ghost Adventure crew did, both of the Zak and Aaron, whenever they went, was it the Goldfield, if I remember the name correctly, where they went to that deserted hotel, and then that's where they experienced the infamous brick flying. They did the whole thing just like this new documentary, where they went into the rich history of the location. They interviewed a lot of people, not just the people directly impacted, but the people that were witnesses as well. They interviewed others as well. Like in this documentary, there was interviews with the police officers that investigated, the caseworkers I was mentioning earlier, some of the people that were the relatives too. There were even people like the father who experienced this stuff there in the home, who was also interviewed, and then some of the people, the guests that Zak brought along for the documentary too. So lots and lots of rich info that was presented. Some people have argued that that's kind of one of the cons of this documentary, because there's so much interview rather than, let's say, investigation. That was one of my fears too. But if you watch the film and you go with the indication that, hey, this info will slowly build the pace up towards the final investigation, then you'll realize that it's great. Like, it's great groundwork. It's great build up towards the eventual payoff, which is the very, very final investigation that Zak has by himself in the home. So it's great to hear all that info, far more detailed than anything I ever read before, and I loved whenever it paced itself like that. I didn't even realize that most of the hour was gone as all these interviews, as all these reenactments, because most of the stuff shown were reenactments of what people were describing, and then pictures, video of the actual location. All that stuff was just picture perfect. Another great thing about this documentary too is the fact that it seems like Zak is a little bit more unrestrained within this film, and it's because it's not TV related. In fact, the first big surprise I got was he was cursing throughout the documentary. It kind of caught me off guard. Not that it matters to me, but having been so used to his Ghost Adventure days, here, when he was first throwing the first F-bomb, it just caught me by surprise. But as I got used to it, it made me realize that, hey, he's more kind of loose within this film, unrestrained, I guess, by the TV guidelines. So it kind of shows whenever they were presenting the info of that too, because you get to see him, I guess, in his element at his best. It was surprising, though, not to see Aaron involved here. I know Nick is gone, from a couple of years back, but still, not to see Aaron here. I wonder what that was about. But you did get to see some of the regular other cast members, like Jay. I forgot what the other guy's name is, but they're within this too. Another really great thing about this movie is that it shows great restraint whenever it comes to what it's showcasing. So the documentary, it could have been like The Conjuring, it could have been like some of the other films, Sinister, where it's more of like, I guess you could call it jump scares. Not really here. It's followed more along the lines of the Ghost Adventure episodes just more stretched out, if you could think of it that way, without commercials, without time restraints. It's just like a special edition Ghost Adventures episode, but in this case, adding more elements to it, and but more restrained at the very same time. So you didn't have the need, I guess, to fulfill a TV audience. In this case, it was more about a viewing audience. In fact, at the very beginning, it kind of warns that watching this film, you do have a chance of ghosts that apparently can make their presence known through multiple mediums, in this case electronic devices, hinting that the TV you're watching may actually help bring in the ghost. So that goes to show at least, where it goes from there when it comes to its unrestrained status. But otherwise, yeah, with regards to the pacing, to the storyline, to the interviews, to the reenactments, to the scenes within the home itself, to finally Zak going into the investigation, that was all very good build up to that nice moment. So now let's talk about finally the investigation itself. Now, this has been cited as one of the bad things within the documentary. I'm still having an issue with it. It's great. I loved it whenever it finally started. I just wish there was more of it. So yes, there is a valid point there. But once it begins, it definitely pays off. So remember I was mentioning earlier, there's that slow build, there's a tension building, all those interviews, the storylines, everything. It finally leads to the investigation. And when it does, it is so perfect because of this. The entire scene, everything now going forward, is just for those 10 minutes, the investigation itself. No music, no reenactments, no flashbacks, nothing else like in terms of moody cuts or weird images. No, it's just you watching Zak within the home itself as he does an investigation. In fact, he even boarded up the home altogether, like the entire home, the outside of the home was boarded up. Even the door was boarded up to ensure that he could stay within the house itself for the entire night, and you are there with him. I loved it when the investigation started that way, because all of a sudden it was dead silence. It was him, one camera, or all the other cameras that were I guess mounted on the walls, but then his own personal camera, him, the silence, the cameras, and that's it. And so you watch as he investigates certain rooms, as he goes into the kitchen, as he goes into the living room, finally into the bedroom. You watch him as if you are there. I loved it with its simplicity, because it could have had a bunch of other stuff mixed in to add more mood, to add more ambience, but no, it used its actual investigation, its raw investigation as is. And it was just amazing, because you are there watching it tensely, just as he is experiencing it. Like, I had no idea what was going to happen. Could there be something that would just suddenly appear? Could there be something else that would slowly just creep up? Who knows? That's the same experience that he was having within the home itself. Brilliant touch, great touch when it comes to this documentary, and the way it finally presented the payoff with the investigation. And then spoilers, there is something that shows on the camera, kind of like so at the beginning, towards the middle of the documentary, they showcase like a black shadow that appears, that seems to follow one of the doctors that's doing an investigation. This black shadow, though, it's kind of hard to make out, but it's through the left corner of the camera, and that's that point. Now, when he's doing his actual investigation, this black shadow seems to make its appearance again. But the way it makes its appearance, it was so creepy. It was so scary. Thank goodness that I wasn't watching this at night by myself. Otherwise, this might have been something else. But otherwise, here's how it goes. So within several minutes of the investigation, there he is within the bedroom, just by himself again, I guess in the pitch black darkness, or as dark as it gets in there. And then he knows that something is there, like somewhere near the doorway, just towards the hallway. Like he knows it because he's staring outward. It's that feeling, I guess, that one gets where, you're not alone. That's essentially the feeling that he had. And then after a few moments of silence, as he's facing the hallway, going outside the door, then that's when we hear something. It starts off as a low growl, but then it grows into a very menacing howl. Like, let's say you could imagine like a dog growling or howling, but much deeper, like a much deeper bass to it. Very menacing, very evil to it too. Like, I had to actually rewind it again because I wanted to hear it to see, was it really that scary? And yes, it was. This obviously caught Zach by surprise, in the sense that he wasn't expecting that deep meaning, that deep evil within it. I guess he kind of could have, because the whole documentary beforehand was stating, how evil this house was. People were, with the possessions, some of the lasting effects, people having cancer from it. Some other person that stated that that they had accidents from visiting this home. There's definitely an evil presence that was sighted within the home all this time. Now this presence was making its appearance here on the documentary. So first it made that deep growl, and he of course was jumping up on the back of the bed, moving towards the wall in a defensive manner. And then finally, you see something. Unfortunately, the camera went a little blurry because in his haste of jumping back towards the wall, the camera fell on the bed, which kind of grew out of focus. And it's at that very moment you see this black mass walk across the hallway. And I have never seen Zach be so scared. And it was genuine scaredness. Like, I was scared for him. Can you imagine what it was like for him within that room itself? So you see this black mass, it's out of focus, you can't really tell what it is, but you definitely see something there move across the hallway. The camera picks it up, it starts to try to focus, but just ever so briefly, and Zach is so scared, he's screaming, get the F out of here, and he starts throwing things into the hallway just out of defensiveness to try to see if he could stop this thing from whatever it is to make its presence known. But that is definitely the big moment in the documentary, whatever this thing is, or if it's one of them or multiple of them in the home. And apparently, as the film alludes early on, it could be a goat man demon like thing that he apparently had a dream of, a peripheral dream of beforehand, before purchasing the home. It could be this thing that made its presence known there. So the entire film led to the payoff of the investigation, and then the investigation itself, done by him in an excellent way, finally led to that moment where this thing makes its appearance. It was a well worth payoff. I definitely loved whenever the documentary shortly ended afterward with it, because it was just like your average movie where you have build up and then you have final climax. This was a perfect way to end the documentary. And then also he had lasting effects from his visit in that home, because if you ever wondered now why Zach always wear these glasses and they look like a unique set of glasses, it's because he stated, and it shows within the film, that staying in the home, something there impacted his eyes. Like, it started messing with his eyes. It started creating something within his eyes, like a double vision on purpose. Like, it wanted to make him know that, yes, we can damage you physically. This is how we're going to damage you, and that's how they did it. So to this day, he states that his eyes have never been the same, and so that's why he wears these glasses, these special glasses, to try to make sure that he can see correctly afterward. But then the film shortly ends afterward, and it showcases him, experiencing his last thing, tearing down the home, his decisions on it too. Some people arguing with him too about not to tear it down because it could just release whatever was in there, but he still decided to do it because so many people were impacted. I haven't even gone into that. Also, there was one of his crew members excuse me, that was severely impacted too, because you have this crew member that was attacked, both it looks like within the home as well, and then also oh my goodness, I'm sorry, within the actual let's say hotel that they were staying at. So when that crew member was attacked, he started just walking around and something was following him, or he was seeing something as well within the hotel. Either way, it was pretty scary. Imagine if you knew somebody with you, a friend, whoever that is, and then they started walking around, yelling at something unseen, telling them, to back off, and they start walking around in a dangerous, almost threatening manner. That was also something that was really scary to see within the film. Well, one thing I wanted to mention too, Zak himself seemed to have been possessed within the home, because there was a few scary moments too whenever it showcases him just suddenly like wanting to attack, I think it was Jay, within the home, like threatening him, pushing him towards the wall, just something taking him over. And the film was able to present that in a really well manner, because in its simplicity it just showcased the raw footage itself, and it left you to decide, essentially what happened afterward. But yes, indeed, the film, these are the good parts. Everything that I mentioned here too, the interviews, storylines, the build-ups, the reenactments, the showcasing of the footage, especially when it comes to the investigation. Everything there was really, really good, and it paid off. So that makes me give it a thumbs up when it comes to this film, especially when it comes to my recommendation to please try to rent it if you can, and then also buy it if you have an opportunity to rewatch it over and over, because I'll be able to see some of the stuff that I missed beforehand, and then present that to you, or present some of that afterward if it comes up later on of importance. But yes, indeed, at least this is part one when it comes to the good stuff associated with this documentary. Part two, I'm going to focus on the bad stuff, and that means more of the criticisms, the rightful criticisms of the documentary, including the family themselves, because there have been some accusations that the family basically made this up, and there is some good evidence that points to it, which I'll talk about within part two. All of that is the main stuff, like the bad stuff, because it kind of leads to the idea that this documentary is not something where it's like either Zak is being fooled or Zak is part of, in this case, this made up stuff. And so who knows? I'm just going to present that to you, and because the film does it itself, and then it leaves it up to you to decide afterward, what's real, what's true, what's false, and so forth. So be on the lookout for that, and then I'll also put some other criticisms of the documentary too. So all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Let me know what you guys think too of the documentary, The Demon House. Have you had a chance to see it? If so, what were your thoughts? Did you like the good parts that I just mentioned too? It'd be great to hear. So all right, everybody, take care. Bye.